So up until now, we've been talking about spiritual delusion and how we so easily fall under this type of self-deception. And part of the problem is that we're just basically not happy with the way things are. We're not content, and so we go looking for something else, something special, maybe supernatural even, especially when it comes to the spiritual path. And basically, this has been our habit since beginningless time. We all admit that we experience suffering. At times we are happy, sometimes more happy than at other times. But as a baseline, then we're not satisfied. And that's why we work, right? That's why we get an education. That's why we practice meditation. It's taught that it's our clinging or our craving which causes us to suffer. But we don't understand that. It's because we don't understand the causes of happiness. We also don't understand the causes of suffering. So what an ordinary being is somebody who wants to be happy, but invests themselves in the causes of suffering rather than the causes of happiness. And not only that, they invest themselves in the causes of suffering, thinking it will bring about happiness. But the practitioners themselves aren't 100% to blame, because we hear a lot of exaggerated claims on the spiritual path. It's not that there isn't something to be realized, or that awakening isn't something special. It is. However, we're often led to believe that things are easier than they are. Or, for example, that awakening, spiritual realization, is something that someone else can proffer upon us, can give to us. This is the claim that many spiritual teachers make. They say that they will introduce their students to a higher level of consciousness. So, of course, we associate it with something special, something external, something that can be given to us. And you can just see this because most people these days, most people I've met, then for them, spirituality is all about taking medicine. When they say medicine, they mean drugs. It's what we normally talk about as intoxicants, ayahuasca, psychedelics, etc. Many people ask me, they say, what's the difference between an acid trip and awakening? And of course, these things are not the same. But it's because we so strongly associate well-being with pleasurable experiences, like getting drunk or having sex, that sort of thing. But this is what we've been doing since the beginning of this time. It's never actually worked up until now. We've always been doing this. If we have a hard day at work, if we've had a hard week, and we go out on the weekend and we party, we drink too much, etc., it only makes us feel worse. It just temporarily puts off our suffering. In the long run, then it creates habitual tendencies and feeds into our addictions. And the situation is much more exacerbated here in the West because we have so much luxury, we have so much wealth, and people have so many addictions. And I don't just mean chemicals, etc. People are addicted to social media, people are addicted to clothing, fashion, movies, whatever. We have it. We have it in oodles. We have just bucket loads of things to become attached to. And what the Buddha taught was that craving itself is a source of our suffering. So if it isn't this supernatural stuff, if it isn't some special experience of higher consciousness or bliss that we're looking for, then what are we looking for? Well, what we're looking for in our meditation is something completely ordinary, something completely normal. Now, it's a bit difficult to describe exactly what that is because we associate with objects so much. We objectify our experience so strongly. So for us, it's just about what's arising at that time. For example, blissful experience, sad experience, the experience of pain, experience of pleasure, these sorts of things. What we don't understand is consciousness itself. And consciousness itself is completely normal. It's not something that needs to be changed in any way. It's nothing special. If this experience of consciousness that was associated with awakening was something special, that would mean that it's there sometimes and it's not there sometimes. You've probably heard about Buddha nature. You've probably heard about the awakening mind. And many people have heard this statement that all beings are already Buddha. For example, people say there is no path to tread. There's no work to do because you're already enlightened. Well, yes, technically that is the case. The problem is we are wrapped up in our narratives. When I say we're wrapped up in our narratives, we've got this story where things aren't okay as they are, and we need something else. And we go searching for that. And then we find obstacles in our quest for pleasurable happiness and experience, or bliss, then that makes us angry and resentful. And this also happens on the spiritual path. people apply themselves for decades in their meditation. Then somewhere down the line, when they realize they're basically in the same place they were when they started, they become despondent. It's called getting jaded. Something else happens to people on the spiritual path, and that is they can't cope with the idea that they haven't succeeded yet in their meditation. And so then that's when they start to fabricate stuff. For example, this woman who fabricated that she's some kind of dakini. I mean, exactly what a dakini is very hard to understand. But basically, if we were already at the end of our journey, then there would be a significant change in the way we experience the world around us. But generally what happens is that people who fall under spiritual delusion start to think that they are special and give rise to pride. And that means they look down on others. For example, they very readily criticize others. And often the people they are criticizing are actually much better than they are, but they can't see that because the delusion of pride and the delusion of jealousy as well are extremely hard to detect. And they're very invasive. And once these feelings, these negative emotions metastasize, then basically your entire spiritual journey has been sabotaged. And then you become an object of derision of others, and also only increase your own suffering and the suffering of others. That's not what we want to do. What we want to do is meditate, become better people, and eventually achieve something called awakening, which is this state that is only beneficent and only positive for others and oneself. But the beginning of that journey is to have a stable mind, a mind that is not carried away by the sense perceptions. But as you can see here, what we tend to do is we try to stimulate our sense perceptions in our pursuit of awakening. So we're actually doing the opposite of what we need to do. When you sit in meditation, whether it's Zen meditation, Mahamudra meditation, or if you're doing Vipassana in the Burmese tradition, then you're not looking to create something in your mind. The problem is that our minds are so good at fabricating. We can fabricate anything. For example, you can imagine anything, right? You can imagine that you have a horn on your head that is so long that it goes right to the other side of the planet and lands in Australia. We can imagine that. You just have to look at your dreams to see how creative the mind is. And so when you sit in your meditation and you go looking for special experiences, all you do is you feed into this natural ability to fabricate, to create things. Creativity itself is not a bad thing, but if you're looking to understand the true nature of phenomena, you don't want to be distracted by objectivizing experience. What is taught is that appearances can neither harm nor help your meditation. They don't need to be removed, per se. For example, we don't need to eliminate thought. We don't need to go into an unconscious state where we do not perceive things, but we use appearances as a focus for our awareness. Now, saying that is a bit deceiving because it makes it sound like there's something separate called awareness from the appearances themselves. Only somebody who actually understands meditation itself will understand how it is that appearances and emptiness or awareness are not separate. It's the same statement as samsara and nirvana are not two. But the reality is it's very hard for us to understand this. And the basis for this, the reason why it's so difficult for us to understand these statements, is because we are so habituated to clinging to external objects. When I say external objects, I mean anything. That could be pleasurable images, that could be nice sounds, pleasant aromas, etc. But it can also be things that you imagine in your own head. As I said, these things don't need to be rejected. For beginners, then first, they have to establish a baseline of mental stability. So, for example, if you're a very anxious person, very angry person, if you're a very greedy person, then your mind will always be carried away by your thoughts. You won't have any ability to create mental stillness and quietude. It's essential to have some base level of quietude in the mind if you're going to be able to investigate the nature of reality. And that's because when we objectivize and we cling to appearances, then we get carried away, just as we get carried away in our dreams. And so when you're sitting in your meditation, your job is not to fabricate or create something. I mean, there are methodologies we use, for example, the tantric practices, where we intentionally create visualizations. But it's very clear there, from the very beginning of these practices, first we make a declaration of emptiness. And this is to stop the practitioner from clinging to the substantial reality of these external appearances. Now, I understand that this is a very difficult topic. And if you don't have much experience in meditation yourself, you won't understand half of what I'm saying. Also, those who fall into spiritual delusion are very unlikely to recognize that they themselves are deluded. In fact, for the most part, they will go out and continually embarrass themselves in front of others, especially in front of those who have experience in meditation. But they won't realize this. They will think that what they're doing is an expression of their superiority. And because of this, then they tend to look down on others. And so, for example, this woman that I'd heard of, then she's continually criticizing people who are, quite frankly, on any measurable metric, far superior to her in spiritual qualities. I know it doesn't sound like a very nice thing to say, because we're told we shouldn't discriminate. But really, you need to recognize positive qualities in others and not look for faults in them. And so this tendency of somebody who falls into spiritual delusion to criticize others, especially others who have many positive spiritual qualities, is only a sign of their own weakness and the depth of their delusion. So here's my advice to you. When you meditate, when you practice mindfulness, generosity, or anything else that you do on the spiritual path, don't look for anything special. Don't look for rewards in the short term. For example, don't give in generosity thinking that your karma will ripen and suddenly you'll become rich. This is absolute insanity if you believe in the Buddhist path. Your task is merely to be present, engage in virtue, and to avoid all negativity. And through this practice of mindfulness and the application of virtuous actions, what will happen is you will thoroughly tame your mind. And then with a tamed mind, there's this opportunity for you to recognize suchness. And we say suchness, that is synonymous with the Dzogchen and Mahamudra. This is the ultimate view of the Buddha Dharma. And the word itself literally means just as it is, how things are. The ordinary mind, the mind that is uncontrived, where there is nothing to be abandoned or adopted. And this is the realization of both the Zen master and a Mahamudra yogi. And it is my wish that you yourself should achieve one of these exalted states, and by this become a fully enlightened Buddha, a state that is garnered solely for the benefit of others. So until next time, then see you later.